Hi, folks. We're experimenting with a new format for Brandon and my simulcast. Uh, we hope you like it. I'm adding this little trailer and then I'm going to clip it together real quick and see if I can avoid doing too much post. So, like, share, subscribe. Tell us if you like it and give us suggestions for additional subject matter. Otherwise, we're just going to riff whenever we can get together on whatever seems to be the most interesting topic of the day and take a look at it from maybe a little bit more spiritual standpoint than the average channel. Hope you like it. Here it comes.
This meeting is being recorded by the host or participant. I agree.
So let me do a quick intro. Here we are again with another Omnis Hour duo with my good friend Brandon from Australia. We were almost delving into today's topic without even intending to, just stuff that we wanted to talk about. So we thought we better drop back and start recording it. So the topic of the day we were just getting into was strange behavior of technology.
The backstory is just before we started this call, or in the process of setting this up, over Zoom, the internet just for no apparent reason cut off and at Rob's end, and we couldn't have the conversation. And then once we got back online, Rob's proceeded to tell me this is not the first time, and it's kind of a regular thing with the multiple devices in his home.
Yeah.
So now we're
speculating being a tech guy by background, I've looked into this, and in fact, like just now, as my connection dropped, the internet was still active on my phone. I was able to text Brandon on my phone, no problem.
Okay.
And as soon as I reconnected, I had to reconnect on my computer again after it had been spontaneously disconnected. And now we're fine, and we've actually got really good connection that we didn't have before, interestingly enough. So maybe the gods of technology are smiling on us now. But what I was telling Brandon is that, with my hardware background, because I spent like a good fraction of my career either in the semiconductor or in the electronics manufacturing industry, I know a lot about how these things get made. And, there was an era post 9/11 when, or maybe even pre 9/11, when my country got very interested in making sure that they could track everybody down to their devices and snoop on them. And so, surreptitiously, they would require companies to put in extra back doors to their hardware to allow the Western cops to get in on things. And then they went to manufacture those things in China, and China just put a back door on top of their back door. So basically, in the grand scheme of things, there's always somebody snooping on you, and there's always somebody with a kill switch. And in fact, there was just I shared on Facebook last week, Facts Matter. You ever watch this show, Facts Matter?
I haven't seen it.
Let's see.
Sounds suspicious to me, though.
There's a guy, something Balmakov, who runs this show, and mostly they don't put his show much on Facebook or on YouTube anymore because they quickly have to take things down or demonetize him. But he does a little bit of it there, and then continues.
Okay, so he's giving real facts.
Yeah, one of the ones that I shared just recently was it finally came out that, in fact, the president, as of the Bush era, has basically full cause to push the kill switch on the internet if he chooses.
Right. If he
should, this is basically something I think almost every government has done, especially after they've seen how successful China was with the Great Firewall. And ultimately, that's the only way that I think you can prevent people sharing information.
yeah, at this stage of the game, it's really the only way. I mean, people can talk word of mouth, of course, but it's very limited, you know, compared to what we have now, to the collective real-time communication and to the volume of it.
Yeah.
I remember when the floods hit, for people outside of Australia watching, you know, big floods in Australia recently, and the area that I was living in was flooded out. It was completely destroyed, in fact. And by some miracle, my caravan ended up making it through it. But anyway, during the course of this disaster, the internet went down. And during that time, it was really revealing to me how much that totally disabled the society, the community on a local level to try to deal with this disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't tell the extent of it. We didn't know where people were, if they were okay, if they weren't okay. We couldn't assess the situation we were in, let alone work out how to communicate ways to deal with it.
Yep.
So it was extremely interesting to see that.
And that's something I think people don't realize till it hits them. Like, I don't know if you did you hear much about the Tonga eruption recently?
Yeah. We actually
Largest
felt
volcanic
some of
eruptions, you know,
that.
in
We felt that here in Australia.
years, and
Right.
virtually destroyed the whole island of Tonga. It was underwater, so but they still don't know exactly what went on there. It destroyed so much of the island that they were out of touch for, you know, they had to send boats to go find out did anybody survive.
And you know what's crazy is that next to nothing of this was reported on the news
Hmm.
here in Australia, and that's local news. That's our area. You hardly saw
Yeah,
any
that's
cover.
probably applies to the US too. I mean, I only know because one of the communities I follow is one that has been following earthquake reporting and predicting.
Hmm.
And in fact, the guy that's invented this kind of voodoo art of earthquake predicting was harassed so much that he stopped broadcasting on YouTube. But every once in a while, when something really interesting happens, like the Tonga eruption, he'll come back and you know give a little bit of a taste of it to the folks that are still on YouTube. He uses Twitch now or something like that, which is, you know, that's a trend that I think is really disturbing. Is that it seems like the only way for people to get truth is to pay for a special service for it. Which, you know, it's fine if you can go to a one-stop shop and pay for truth, but you've got like
Well,
multiple.
these are the times we're living in. You know, sometimes we have to pay for truth, and I tell you what, it's good value for money.
It is, but
Down
well,
here in
it's
the
like
trenches, where
look
you
at
have
Trump's
people
new
trying to
creation,
take
Truth
the truth
Social.
away.
If you believe that a platform created by a former president, whether you like him or not, is going to be truth and not echo chamber, I mean, you're living in a fantasy world.
Oh, true. I mean, I'm not suggesting it should be one's only source of information. And
You know, and I think there are other people doing similar things, and everybody seems to have an agenda.
sure.
I mean, like, look at the whole thing with Elon Musk. You think he doesn't have an agenda? Of course he does.
And I'm curious, what do you think it is, though? Because everyone I speak to about this is so positive about it. They feel like, isn't it great? Elon's got Twitter. This is a great victory for free speech. It's a great victory for, you know, freedom to communicate, you know.
Yeah, and I
I
think,
feel the
you know,
same like this, but there's another something else going
well,
on.
my read on Elon Musk is that he's a well-intentioned guy, but he is what I would consider spiritually naive. Okay, the few times he's ever talked about his spiritual beliefs, it's pretty clear that he doesn't really have any strong feelings. He doesn't, you know, he's just
Mm.
like a fence sitter. So, you know, very
Yeah,
strong
right. I
agnostic.
kind of get that feeling as well. I
And
mean, a lot of these highly scientific-minded people become that way. My brother's like that. I would describe him as a fence sitter, and it's interesting how that people can do that. People can use the language and the modality of science to in a way, you know, not really be self-responsible and accountable and realistic spiritually,
mhm,
and use it to sort of to create that fence to sit on.
Yeah. And here's the moral hazard there. You can say, well, I have my own morality. I've got my own, I'll do the right thing because I'm me. But when push comes to shove, like here's a for instance scenario. Suppose that some years down the road, Elon's got his full Starlink constellation up.
Yeah.
And some kind of particle storm or something takes down some number of satellites. That's going to affect service. Okay. Is he going to, or are his people going to tell you the full story about it? And how long it's going to take to replace those satellites, or will they give you kind of a spin that doesn't lose any subscribers?
I don't think he'll maintain a monopoly over it. I think he's the first mover in these industries, but by the time it gets to where you're talking about, I think there'll be other players involved.
Yeah, but there will be temptations, especially if
it's a lot of power. It's still centralized power. That's the thing. Yep. Okay, he might be Elon for whatever that means, but it's still a massive centralization of, imagine if he had his full realization or even partial realization of all these companies that he's managing and directing, he'd have a full space fleet up there and people all over. He'd be colonizing the moon and Mars. Yep. He'd have everybody, or not everybody, but he'd have people Neuralinked and jacked into a transhuman mental framework to log on to the AI with their minds and then communicate with this Starlink and have everybody driving around in autonomous electric vehicles.
Yeah. And imagine the free version of Neuralink where you have to get advertising.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, 100%.
Suppose that China decides that they're going to go declare war on the world, and they use their missile fleet to wipe out all the big satellite systems that are very vulnerable, the military satellites and the other internet linked older ones that have only 3 or 4 geostationary satellites. Well, I don't think they'll be able to wipe out Musk's entire fleet, because you're looking at especially if it's fully built out, you're looking at 40,000 satellites, little tiny ones that can reconfigure themselves for ones that fall out. So if that happens, China and Elon Musk will be like the 2 world powers left.
Yes.
Right.
That's a good point. He's very strategically investing in technology infrastructure in a way.
And suddenly Elon Musk becomes the leader of the free world, which that might be exactly what we need. I'm not saying that wouldn't be a good idea, but it's a scenario that we need to consider.
Yeah. He is certainly positioning himself right at the very helm of technology in general. And really using it to the full capacity of his resources and doing this. So yeah, it's an extraordinary situation with Elon.
And I mean, the other thing that I think this brings up is kind of related to the message that I'm always harping on, is that anytime you concentrate so much power, so much authority in one set of hands, a human set of hands for sure, what happens if Elon gets assassinated? His whole empire basically is headless.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is not secure. It's like building a house of cards. It doesn't matter who it is.
And what I find hard to understand is how many people want to cling to the same idea on the spiritual plane. It's like, you don't want one almighty micromanaging master of the universe that everyone has to pray to. That would be silly. No self-respecting God would organize heaven that way.
No, it's still based on that old sort of hierarchical consciousness.
And that's captured in every religious tradition until this idiotic idea of cosmic oneness came along, that there is some hierarchy. The angels may be not as powerful as God, or in the Muslim tradition, they have the jinn. In the
you're
Catholic,
saying that
and they add saints and stuff like that, which are like lower than the angels, right?
are you saying that these hierarchies are of benefit inside the spiritual matrix?
Yeah, actually, the hierarchies in my teaching, which I don't expect anybody to adhere to, but it certainly makes sense, and it's been thoroughly tested by this brain. There are 12 levels of consciousness. The four lowest ones are physical levels. The four next ones are spiritual levels, and the highest ones are God levels. In the lowest levels, that's where souls play when they're doing constant reincarnation. Try this life, try that life, and not necessarily just in human form, but in a lot of other forms, because basically every organization of matter, energy, or thought is a soul. You give the name to something and it becomes embodied by a soul, if you will. And as those souls gain experience through incarnation, between lives, they go to the spiritual realm, heaven, if you will, but they go to one that's designed to train souls that kind of look like them. So there's a Christian heaven, there's a Muslim heaven, there are multiple Christian and Muslim heavens because there's different sects. And there's people within those sects, there's a people that believe, really believe that, or there's people that are just kind of, Sunday Christians that, you know what, we're going to send you to the heaven for Christians who really aren't Christians, but they worship money or they worship power. And you get a different experience. And then you come back and you try again. And I don't know, are you familiar with the idea of a Merkaba?
Yeah, the
Okay,
Merkaba
so
figure.
if you extrapolate from the simple two-dimensional idea of what the Merkaba is, in 3 dimensions, it's basically a double tetrahedron. Now that only
One going up that way, one going down that way.
Yeah, that only encompasses 2 of these states. That doesn't encompass the third one, which is the one where you start building when you start incarnating as a god. And each of these levels is a different kind of incarnation, different kind of experience. It's not like you have to experience humanity and then you get to go to nirvana. This is bullshit. I'm sorry if I piss off any Buddhists with that, but it's absolute bullshit. You're always learning, always growing, and always being tested. Even gods, especially gods, because as we know from the history books, gods have done a lot of bad things, caused floods. We've had old Zeus, who was horny as hell and knocked up swans and bulls and things like that.
I must say it's good to have this time here to have a chat with you again, Rob. It's been so long since we've had a good chat.
Yeah, we used to have quite the day. I remember you would always be just about the last one to leave, or you'd stay overnight after our karaoke parties, and then we'd talk into the night about just about anything and everything.
Yeah, on the cosmic shores of Shanghai.
That's been an interesting place lately. Have you kept up with anybody from there?
I haven't. I've been hearing Chinese whispers that there's something going on over there.
Yeah, it's been pretty.
What have we got?
I joined a group on Facebook called Shanghai Ning, which was a group founded for people who had spent time in Shanghai but had gone back to their home country so they could keep in touch.
Oh, that's nice.
It's been interesting to see the conversations because, there's a whole bunch of people that went to China and got back and never got past the Potemkin curtain, right?
The what? Sorry.
Do you know what what Potemkin signifies?
No.
Okay, it's a term from the USSR. So back in the old days under
they never
Russian
got in the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, and even before
they never got back through the Iron Curtain.
There was a a Russian general and statesman who was famous for propaganda. And he would, in order to show the world how perfect Russia was under the Tsar, they would build whole villages and populate them with these wonderful, these peasants saying, "Oh, how wonderful it is to be a serf in Russia."
When you're a czar, you can build a big set.
And so this idea of
A lot
Potemkin
of actors.
village is what China does on a huge scale. Basically, the whole city of Shanghai is one big Potemkin village. And if you never go to one of the older neighborhoods, where they haven't renovated and put up these big high rises, it's like you're in a third world country. All the old guys are sitting out smoking in the street in their pajamas, and
you don't have to go far, do you? You just need to go down to the end of the elevator, and there
raw
it is.
sewage in the street and everything else.
That's part of the experience of living in Shanghai, isn't it? That huge clash of realities, to where, like you say, they've built this thing, which I always used to hear that phrase, smoke and mirrors. That was often how I used to kind of see it, smoke and mirrors. And then down on the street, there's real stuff. The contrast between what's the intensity of the reality happening down there on the street, which is going on all around you all of the time, on a really basic level. Like you say, people who are poor rural people are right there. And then this design of this modern concept of, there are people there. There are people living in all of those places. But again, like you said, that doesn't mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's real. So,
or it's representative of all of China.
Yeah, in your picture of the Tsar's village that he made, that'd be better. You'd be better off living there, because at least he's
could, but they don't keep them up forever. They just put them up.
At least they don't have to go to work to live there.
This is basically what they did when they started getting flack for the whole Uyghur thing. They created Potemkin villages, and then they sent they call folks that go, and the Westerners that go and report on this and say, "Oh, it's all fake news. China's really perfect." They call those white monkeys. I don't know if you heard that phrase.
No, and you mean they're the
Chinese? That's exactly what they call them, is white monkey.
You mean the journalists that come over there to report?
Basically, fake journalists that do the bidding of the Communist Party. I don't know if you ever took any of these kind of jobs, but I know a lot of my friends did. Like Richard used to get these all the time, where they would approach some foreigner and say, "Okay, you want to make 3,000 RMB a day and all expenses, and go on a little trip." And they would go to a factory or something and pretend like they were some high mucky inspecting the factory. And then we record it all and show it all. And then they would use that to show off to other companies. "See, such and such from IBM came here and they just loved our factory."
I got to be honest, because we're live and we're talking and we're here together with people, viewers. There might be someone viewing this. I've got to be honest and say, I did that. And they offered me the money, and all I had to do was turn up and read off a script for a little bit and sit at a big table in front of a few hundred potential buyers and pretend to be a Canadian chemicals expert, and how I was the designer behind this brand new product coming out, which they could use to fertilize their farms with. And I didn't feel good about it.
Yeah. But you don't really think it's going to be something bad, and the money's really good, and it's so easy that it's easy to fall into that.
I didn't even know what it was until after I was balls deep in it. I was involved. I was sitting at the dinner table. They were telling me, "Don't talk Chinese. Don't let them know anything about it."
And it's one thing when you're doing it to help a company get commercial advantage and fool somebody, or like I even did one. I didn't get paid for it, but one time, you remember Henry Sun?
Yeah.
He was the Chinese guy that got involved with the theater. I always
Yeah,
thought it
yeah,
was kind of strange him hanging around like he did. He was very helpful, very nice. Well,
yeah.
now I realize he was a minder.
Right.
And one time, just before he disappeared from our circle, he invited Jonathan and me, and I think Christy, to go be special guests at this performance. And I realized after we were there that he'd sold us, up as being, oh, these are big name Western actors and so forth. And he was probably getting a pretty good chunk of change from that. And right after that, I think he dropped out because maybe somebody did some checking and figured out, well, these guys live right in Shanghai and they run this little podunk community.
Maybe he'd gotten paid, mate. He got what he needed. He got what he wanted and was
Who
out of there.
knows? But I mean, in retrospect, looking back on it, it's like there's another thing that I think back on
Yes.
that at the time I just kind of blew it off. But I got to
Mm.
noticing that there was always this guy sitting outside my apartment building, thing on his phone, watching, reading his paper, and it was like the same guy. And
Okay.
he was always there when I got back. And after hearing how other people's experiences with being followed by minders, I figured, you know what, that probably was a minder, because as a leader of a community theater in Shanghai, I was probably a very strong person of interest. They wanted to make sure that I didn't do
Right.
anything that stepped over any lines,
Yes.
or anybody I
Yes.
was meeting with was recorded. So, and I think
Right.
that's something that people don't understand about, authoritarian societies. You may think you've got a lot of freedom, but in fact, an Orwellian society doesn't mind if you commit crimes. They actually encourage it, because as long as they've got a recording of it, as long as it's documented, that becomes something that they can use as leverage to control you.
Hmm.
And so, that's basically looking back on everything I saw in China. Everybody was encouraged to get into as much shit as they could, because it was just more
And do you know
icing on
what
the
that
cake if they ever
reminds me
needed to
of
be
when you
deported
say
or imprisoned.
that model is very similar to the Masonic Lodge, to where people come into these societies, then they slowly start having them be complicit and join in with illegal acts, sacrifices, abuse, and all of these things,
Right.
and it's the same model, because then they've
And it
got
goes
them.
all the way back to the ancient mystery cults.
Mm.
Every mystic cult in an old religion had this dark side. And you don't hear much about it anymore. But an example I'll give you is with the Muslims. The assassins were grown out of the Islamic mystery cult, the Sufis, which you think, oh, they're all love and light and oneness. Well, actually, they have their dark side. The dervishes were what started it, and they got into these trances by dancing. And this grew into the assassin set, who also did, like drugs to get them in a kind of a fierce state where they would go commit murders, and they wouldn't care if they got caught or killed. They were just mind set on assassinating, which sounds quite a
Mm.
bit like the CIA, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, the dark side of these religions. I
And
mean,
so there's a mind control aspect to
yeah,
organized religions that I think everybody realizes is something that they don't like. And the funny thing is how you would know that that exists and then want to be in a mind control religion. I mean, you look in the Bible at the book of Ezekiel and the description of heaven, and it's like, okay, you've got the Lord up on the throne, and you've got the highest angels bowing, blah, 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 and you got the next angels that have a million eyes. Blah, 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 blah. It sounds like hell to me. And this is what's pointed out as being a vision of heaven. And it looks like Borg heaven to me.
right. Yeah. I don't know if they'll be so want to give us a true depiction of some transcendence.
Yeah. And so I think there's been a tendency in history of real prophecy real understanding of the spiritual world being bastardized by folks that want to create a cult of power.
Yeah. What do you think about what's going on in the Vatican? Have you heard any news about anything that's going on there recently, or even more broadly? What do you think is happening there in the Vatican
Not
as well?
recently. I think the only things that I've seen recently that I went through a recent phase where I was interested in exorcism because I don't know if you followed my Ramadan specials, but I did an experiment in exorcism during that month, the month of fasting. At any rate, so I found some material on exorcism, and it was interesting to see uh, some of the ones that were really sincere about that activity in the church were very, very open about the risks of it and why, they didn't think that anybody should devote their whole life force to such a dangerous thing.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
I think they're coming to an understanding of the allure of power and how they may have transgressed and I think they're starting to deal with that and maybe there's a change coming in opening up and saying, yes, we allowed these things to be done. They're starting to open up about the child abuse and so forth. I don't know where it's going, whether they're going to go full disclosure, but I have
Some
a
of the
feeling.
detail that I've been hearing is that whole area is a hotbed for all of these things that you're talking about. Not only have they turned a blind eye, but they've been centrally
Mhm.
complicit in enabling, and there's dungeons and all sorts of things underneath, and a whole underground area to the place. I mean, there's underground areas all over the world, of course, but a whole dark satanic situation going on that sounds like it's completely gone to the worship of satanic ritual.
Maybe I'm not convinced that the whole church is like that, but or even
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
all
the
of the
whole
higher
church is
ups. But it's like, yeah, in any organization there are going to be groups.
just like
It's like,
that
I
side.
mean, the Jesuits pretty much operated as a very separate arm of the church, which really didn't come under papal control to any great extent.
Hmm.
So anyway, we're down to less than a minute for Zoom recording. Maybe we might want to switch back to ManyCam if we can get that working sometime.
Oh, is this the maximum amount of time that you can
Yeah,
record?
the free version of Zoom is limited to 45 minutes. Do you want to
Okay.
continue in another session and I'll patch them together, or you think we done?
Oh, let's just shut it. Yeah, let's close it down and continue our discussions off camera,
Okay, sounds
and
good.
and then get a few different ideas moving.
Okay. Actually, why don't we start up another session? I'll record it, but I won't post it unless we get some people begging for it. Maybe we can get some subscriptions.